mind.
Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host, Tom D'Ambra. As always, we're very thankful you take the time from your busy day to watch our program. My friends, unfortunately, another horrific mass shooting has taken place down in the state of Florida. Folks, I don't know when the American people are going to have enough of this and start looking for real answers. And what I am talking about is all the demographics that make up these horrific events. The psychotropic drugs that go unquestionably are linked to some of these shootings. Actually, all of the mass shootings that have taken place in schools by students, every single one of them, and we read these to you before, have been on psychotropic drugs. No denying that. Number two, the deterioration of the American family continues. And we're going to get into this and more to break down some studies, both within the government and outside the government, about what are the results of a fatherless family. But before we get into that, I want to get into some good news. For those of you that do believe in getting off the couch, it would be a good idea, in my humble opinion, that you would call your Congress critter and let them know about H.R. 4916. Now, H.R. 4916 is appropriately titled Preventing IRS Abuse and Protecting Free Speech Act. My folks, this is the beginning of taking the control mechanisms of the government, particularly the bankers, through the IRS with regards to our churches and other organizations. Now, we have told you before about the Johnson Act, and what this act actually is going to do, my friends, is it's going to eliminate a form, and the form number is 990. It's a Schedule B paperwork. But what it's going to eliminate, my friends, is that your pastors, if this bill is passed, are no longer going to have to adhere to the Johnson Act, which forbids your pastors, if they wish to get their tax break, if you would, where they don't have to pay taxes. But the gist of that, the give and take, is that, yeah, they don't pay taxes, but they're stifled. They're no longer able to give what they perceive to be what the message should be of the day. They can't talk about the government. They can't talk about its policies. They cannot enter that arena at all. That is the compromise. You won't have to pay your extortion fee, but you can't talk bad about us. That's the compromise. So, my friends, HR 4916, please make some phone calls, send some emails, text, whatever. Let them know that you are watching what they're portraying. Okay, let us get into a statement here by Mr. Putin. When I first saw this, my friends, I really didn't think that this was true. But after doing some research, and I found it broadcast on RT, not that I take RT for everything that they say is concrete truth, but I found this, if this wasn't a statement by Mr. Putin, I found the guise of it to be interesting enough. Now, this is, again, from February 22nd, this year, 2018. And I'm just going to read this verbatim to you. This is actually from the website Babylon Bee, with the link from RT, which is Russia Today. Moscow. After years of meddling by Russian agents and Russia-funded bots and hacking attempts, the Kremlin announced Thursday it would be withdrawing from all activity in the United States and would instead be allowing the country to tear itself apart without any help from them. Now, this is a supposed quote from Vladimir Putin. And by the way, I will say that they were meddling in the election, and they were meddling in the election in the favor of Hillary Clinton and the State Department, because they had already paid her hundreds of millions of dollars for all these favors, Uranium One and so forth. We've got into that many, many times. Now listen to Vladimir Putin here, purportedly. Our spies and bots simply couldn't keep up with the rapid pace at which America is destroying itself, Russian President Vladimir Putin said in a press conference Thursday. They're on the verge of tearing each other to shreds. Really, it's quite impressive. Putin stated his spies stationed abroad tried their hardest to divide America, but were outpaced and outclassed at every turn by the country's highly motivated politicians and partisan activists who are doing a far better job than his own spies could at ripping the country apart. They don't need our help, apparently, said Putin, so we'll just get out of the way and let them have at it. Bravo, America, Putin added. And this is all part, my friends, of the divide paradigm that we have been speaking about for so long on this program. The divide paradigm. Let us continue. Now, we've read this quote to you before, but I thought it was so appropriate to today's topics. This is from Huxley. The perfect dictatorship would have the appearance of a democracy, but would basically be a prison without walls in which the prisoners would not even dream of escaping. It would essentially be a system of slavery where, through consumption and entertainment, the slaves would love their servitudes. My friends, with that being said, we are going to broadcast a short documentary piece called Scientific Dictatorship in the Future of Humanity. And I would like to thank Old Thinker News for putting this together and allowing it to be brought out into all media avenues to get this information out. So Bill, if we could, why don't we go ahead and roll that, and my friends, we'll see you on the return.
The scientific dictatorships of the future, and I think there are going to be scientific dictatorships in many parts of the world, will be probably a good deal nearer to the Brave New World pattern than to the 1984 pattern. They will be a good deal nearer, not because of any humanitarian qualms in the scientific dictators, but simply because the Brave New World pattern is probably a good deal more efficient than the other, and that there seems to be a general movement in the direction of this kind of ultimate revolution, this method of control by which people can be made to enjoy a state of affairs which, by any decent standard, they ought not to enjoy.
And these issues, furthermore, are made more acute by the coincidental phenomenon of what I have called in my writings the global political awakening. This is a truly transformative event on the global scene, namely that for the first time in human history, for the first time in all of human history, almost all of mankind is politically awake, activated, politically conscious, and interactive. And these new and old major powers face still yet another novel reality, in some respects unprecedented. And it is that while the lethality of their power is greater than ever, their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. I once put it rather pungently, and I was flattered that the British Foreign Secretary repeated this, as follows. Namely, in earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people, literally. It was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people.
You have a criminal ruling class that have made a religion out of understanding how human beings operate and what makes people tick, a religion out of manipulating the population, a religion out of the elite passing their power on generation to generation. That's what royalty is. A religion of self-worship where they believe that they are the chosen ones. And not only will they find the way to dominate the planet through genetic engineering and bioweapons, but that they will find the way to extend their lives. It isn't vanity, it isn't arrogance, it's just love of the species, love of life, love of knowledge, wanting to communicate, wanting to huddle in the cave with your tribe forever, not wanting to leave your loved ones. But imagine the most selfish, the most cunning, the most wicked, the most sadistic, those that would cut corners, those that would lie, those that would stab in the back, and those that would do it the most convincingly. They get the birthright of humanity. They get the great flower of our technology and everything we've built. We're an amazing species. We're not parasites. We're master builders. We're great engineers. We are made in the image of God. We are architects. The sun, the moon, the stars. This is the evidence of the creation. This is the evidence of the incredible beauty and unbelievable gift of life and consciousness. I am thankful for it. I rejoice in it. I appreciate it. And all I wanted to do is defend innocence and try to get people to believe in themselves and to build and to not feel inadequate. Because once Madison Avenue mind control makes you feel inadequate and insecure, they can then sell you whatever lies they want. And they build you into monsters. They turn you into biological androids operating off of outside, artificial, dehumanizing stimuli. Come on, folks, you can figure this out. You can break out of your conditioning. You can realize how they're manipulating us. You can understand their master plan. We can defeat them.
You may have noticed, my friends, that Mr. Huxley was actually part of that documentary. And did you listen to what the man said? Basically surmising with this statement right here, that the perfect dictatorship would have the appearance of a democracy, but would basically be a prison without walls in which the prisoners would not even dream of escaping. It would essentially be a system of slavery where, through consumption and entertainment, the slaves would love their servitudes. Absolutely true. Okay, let us get into some horrific news here. This here is, and I wanted this picture, folks. And Bill, if we could put this up on the big screen for the viewers, look at this person's eyes. This is Nicholas Cruz, the supposed shooter in Florida, responsible for wounding and murdering 17. He was responsible for it, not the gun. Purportedly, he was responsible. Although this thing stinks to high heaven, just like the Vegas shooting, just like Columbine and many, many others. Sandy Hook, all the rest of them. But look in this man's eyes. This man is either possessed by the devil himself, on psychotropic drugs, or more likely, all the above. I want to read this article to you. This is by Mike Adams over at Natural News. And I'm just going to read it real quick. With each passing day, the official story of the Parkland, Florida high school shooting continues to unravel. In its place is emerging an increasingly horrifying conspiracy involving Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel, whose 4 deputies appear to have been ordered to stand down and allow the shooting to unfold in order to achieve a higher body count for political gain. Astonishing, CNN is accidentally confirming a shocking revelation that adds additional evidence to this conspiracy in a February 23, 2018 story by the fake news propagandist known as Jake Tapper. CNN admitted that 4 Broward County Sheriff's deputies stood by and watched the shooting take place, refusing to enter the building and stop the shooter. As Tapper writes, when the Coral Springs police officers arrived at Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida on February 14th in the midst of the school shooting crisis, many officers were surprised to find not only that Broward County Sheriff's Deputy Scott Peterson, the armed school resource officer, had not entered the building, but that 3 other Broward County Sheriff's deputies were also outside the school and had also not entered. Coral Springs sources tell CNN the deputies had their pistols drawn and were behind their vehicles, the sources said, and not one of them had gone into the school. Some Coral Springs police were stunned and upset that the 4 original Broward County Sheriff deputies who were first on the scene did not appear to join them as they entered the school, Coral Springs sources say. Until this report, we were all aware that one deputy stood by and did nothing while the shooting took place, but this report from CNN raises that number to 4, pointing to the likelihood that this was a coordinated stand-down order. Who gave that order? Most likely the deputy's boss, an anti-gun sheriff registered as a Democrat who was said to be best friends with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the same Clintonista operative who helped engineer numerous election conspiracies and fraud, destruction of evidence, and lying to the government. Schultz, in case you didn't remember, is the same Democratic operative who threatened the U.S. Capitol Police with consequences for refusing to turn over a laptop that contained incriminating evidence against Amran Awan, a foreign national widely outed for involvement in data theft and national security breaches. Amran Awan, his wife, and his 2 brothers, Abdid and Jamal, and a friend all worked as IT aides for dozens of Democratic members of Congress. Shortly after WikiLeaks published the Democratic National Committee's emails and during that led up to the 2016 election, investigators discovered indications that they were using a server for nefarious purposes and could be reading and or removing information according to a top brief. They were banned from the White House network in February 2017, but Wasserman Schultz, a Democrat from Florida, refused to fire Awan. Sheriff Scott Israel, the sheriff of Broward County when the shooting took place, is widely known to be an anti-gun Democratic operative. For example, during a recent Sean Hannity broadcast entitled Defending Our Schools, aired February 22, 2018, a caller outed Israel for colluding with Democratic anti-gun schemers, saying, "I graduated from Stoneham Douglas in 2004. The sheriff of my county down here, Scott Israel, is a politician. He's a leftist. He is best friends with Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Ted Dutch, excuse me. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. He's not a sheriff. So when people look at our community now, because it's been thrust into a spotlight and they talk about the sheriff's department, let's just be real clear. He is not a sheriff. He is a politician who masquerades behind a badge. The first thing out of his mouth last week was gun control. Didn't say hi to our governor at the press conference and talked about defeating people who take money from the NRA. Scott Israel, it turned out, was accused of public corruption long before the shooting, as reported by the Florida Sun-Centennial. Since winning one of the most powerful elected posts in Broward County, Sheriff Scott Israel has hired from the ranks of his political supporters, building a community outreach wing his critics say doubles as his re-election team. A log of employees hired by the sheriff shows 10 workers were hired since 2013 into outreach roles, their salaries totaling over $634,000. Israel's opponents say he's built a publicly funded political machine, paying back supporters with jobs and using them to keep him in office. They say the money could be better spent, particularly after the sheriff complained about not having enough funding to secure the county courthouse where a murder suspect recently escaped. In other words, Sheriff Scott Israel uses taxpayers' money to fund his own political re-election outreach scheme, shoring up his public image while failing to invest financial resources on stopping murderers. And what better way to steal the limelight for a re-election than to order a stand down during a school shooting than claim to be the savior? What have I done differently than Don Shula or Abraham Lincoln or Martin Luther King, Gandhi? Israel asked critics, according to the Sun-Sentinel. Sheriff Israel's department had logged over 29 calls on the school shooter before the mass murder event. They knew he was about to commit murder. Adding to the damning evidence against Sheriff Israel, his department had received 20 calls warning about Nicholas Cruz before he carried out the mass shooting. Yet Israel's office did nothing. Were they ordered to stand down and let the massacre take place, and then ordered to allow the shooting to be carried out without interference? Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel said Friday that his office found that it had received approximately 20 calls relating to Nicholas Cruz, the 19-year-old suspect of carrying out Florida's deadliest high school shooting that left 17 people dead, says the Washington Examiner. CNN reported that Sheriff's Department had called to Cruz's homes more than 30 times since 2010. According to one incident report unearthed by the news network, professionals and officers wrote that Cruz suffers from mental illness and had mentioned that he was interested by purchasing a gun. Even more alarmingly, Israel's office had specifically warned that Cruz was poised to carry out a mass shooting. As reported in Zero Hedge, the most serious warning came on November 30th, 2017, when a caller located in Massachusetts advised that Cruz was collecting knives and was likely to conduct a school shooting. The caller was concerned Cruz would kill himself and be a school shooter in the making. They believe Cruz's weapons were kept at a friend's house. Listen, the sheriff. Okay, folks, I'm going to stop. That was an interview with Laura Loomer. What does this all mean? Increasingly, it looks like the school shooting massacre was allowed to take place by Scott Israel, making sure the disturbed, deranged teen was never arrested or even detained for mental health evaluation. Imagine that. He was never no mental health evaluation. They knew he would eventually pop off on a deadly rampage, and they did nothing to stop it. Once the shooting began, it became increasingly obvious that Israel's deputies were ordered to stand down, making sure the shooter had sufficient time to achieve the high enough body count that would catapult Scott Israel into the national spotlight, gaining him political points while launching a new nationwide anti-gun initiative that has always been the end-game goal of Democratic operatives like Obama, Clinton, and Schultz. Consider who gains from this mass shooting. Who had the motive? Folks, we say it all the time. Key bono. Who benefited here? Okay. Folks, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to just do one quick assessment here. Over the last 2 years, Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel became aware of the deranged teen and his threats to carry out mass murder, then realized he could exploit the situation for his own political gain. In order to exploit the situation, when the mass shooting event began, Israel ordered his deputies to stand down, ensuring a large body count. His deputies stood by and intentionally did nothing. The shooting would have been even worse if it were not for the Coral Springs police, who did rush to the scene, breached the building, and halted the violence. Immediately after the mass shooting took place, Scott Israel sought out the TV cameras and claimed credit for halting the shooting, immediately framing himself as a savior character. Remembering, he likens himself to Abraham Lincoln while calling for anti-gun legislation to save the children. His actions also gained major points in his Democratic operative friends like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who has been at the center of every major political scam and scandal for over the last 2 years, including the DNC's fraudulent vote rigging against Bernie Sanders. Okay, my friends, I am going to stop there. Let's get into some other quick things here. Bill, if we could, let us do the role number 2 with the teacher giving her account of events. And this is a teacher who was wounded, giving her account of events, that what she witnessed. Bill, let's go ahead and roll that, please.
One week ago, Valentine's Day, creative writing teacher Stacy Lapel's class was playing music, writing love letters, when the fire alarm went off. As students filed into the hallway, she heard gunfire. The killing had begun.
I was about 2 feet away from my door. All of a sudden, I heard gunshots in the stairwell, which is about 20 feet away from my room. And then kids were screaming and then running back towards me and towards the end of the hallway. So I just went in this very strange autopilot mode where I pivoted on my feet, I unlocked my door, and then kids just started pouring in my room. I don't know how many kids were in there, but I was pulling them and getting them in and shouting at them to get in the room. And then I suddenly saw the shooter about 20 feet from me, standing at the end of the hallway, actively shooting down the hallway, just a barrage of bullets. And I'm staring at him thinking, why is the police here? This is strange, because he's in full metal garb, helmet, face mask, bulletproof armor, shooting this rifle that I've never seen before. I don't know when I decided it was the right time to close the door. I grabbed the handle with both hands, and that's when I got nicked or grazed or whatever you call it.
So a bullet hit your arm?
Yes. As I'm closing my door, I'm shouting at my next door neighbor, Mr. Scott Beagle, to close his door. And he's the kind of man that would just keep that door open a little longer. You know, he's all about the kids, you know, but he couldn't see the shooter. I had a good visual of him, which is why I yelled at him to shut his door now. I heard him shoot a barrage of bullets into Mr. Beagle's room. And then he came to my room and shot about 4 or 5 shots into my room, breaking the glass of my door. There's a rectangular piece of glass. And I heard him continuously shooting down the hallway. And I never really knew when he left because we just thought he was still there. It was so quiet, and then all of a sudden I hear helicopters outside, far, far in the distance, it seemed to me. Police officers far, far in the distance. Kids were screaming in the hallway for help. We're trained not to let anybody in the room. And I would say a good 45 minutes went by, maybe an hour, and when we heard the SWAT team come on the floor, but I still didn't trust that it was them, because they were banging on the doors. Police let us in. No one got up.
Okay, my friends. So now we see that, I want to surmise this real quick, that basically this teacher, she uses the word full metal garb, but this teacher was confused because this supposed shooter that you see here being captured on site, no gob, none of the turtle shells, as we used to call them, was he wearing. The teacher also, along with students, when the police finally did enter in their full metal garb, they didn't go to the police. Why? Because they weren't sure who the shooters were. That's why. Now, Bill, if we would, let us go ahead and roll the student giving her account of what she witnessed at this event.
I actually was in the bathroom at the moment, and I came back to my classroom and I knocked on the door, and the fire alarm went off, and principal came on the speaker and just said, everyone needs to evacuate right now. So that's what we did. As I was going down the stairs, I heard a couple shots fired. Everyone was freaking out, saying that it was a gun. And as we were walking, the whole class together, I actually was speaking to the suspect, Nicholas Cruz. And as I was speaking to him, he seemed very, I don't know what the word I want to say is, but he was trouble in middle school. So I kind of joked to him about it and said, I'm surprised you weren't the one who did it. And he just gave me a huh. So that's really what happened.
You were walking down the hall. He had already fired at that time.
Yes, sir, with him.
Weren't you scared?
In the moment I wasn't, because there was obviously definitely another shooter involved, but...
Oh, you think he was not the only one?
No, definitely not.
Why do you say that?
Because when shots were fired, I saw him after the fact. So, and the shots were coming from the other part of the building. So there definitely had to be two shooters involved, I believe.
That's the first I've heard of that. Did you see any other students who were wounded?
No, sir.
Okay, so we have a teacher, a female teacher, and then we also had another male teacher that we weren't able to capture, also saying, questioning, I should say, what they witnessed and questioning who the actual shooter/shooters were. Now, the only thing that failed here, my friends, was, well, let me see, the government. Law enforcement failed, my friends. And let's see if this is enough evidence that maybe someone should have knocked on this guy's door. How about this one? This is just some of the things that he did say through social media. And I'm just going to read one because I'm already behind. I'm going to be a professional school shooter. Thank you. Done. How about knock, knock, knock? How about knock, knock, knock? I'm going to be a professional school shooter. And you want to hear something even crazier, my friends? He signed it with his real name. He didn't even try to fake him out. He signed it with his real name. He told everybody. They had over 29 people that actually contacted either the FBI or the sheriff or the state police in Florida and said, listen, this kid's going to go off. And yes, folks, he was on psychotropic drugs. And I don't have the time, but I have, these have all been unclassified. I have them right here. Folks, 5 pages. I don't have time to read them to you. I was going to, but I don't have time. About them telling the FBI, the emails sent to the FBI, the communications sent to the FBI, and the different various law enforcement agencies. 29 of them. No one thought to give this guy a knock? Can you say MK Ultra? Can you say MK Ultra? Okay. Folks, I am going to stop here. I'm not going to read all of them to you just for the sake that I want to get into the main subject matter today. And before you think that guns are the problem, you've got to understand, my friends, that up until 1964, there was gunsmithing classes, there was shooting sports, all involved in public schools. And there were no mass murders. Imagine that. Wonder why? Well, let me see. God was still in our schools. Morality was still taught. Morality was the foundation of education. There was no psychotropic drugs these kids were on. Now, folks, I know we've showed these graphs before to you. And I'm not trying to pick on any race or culture of people. But I want to show you the results that we're getting through what's being implemented. So let us go through these graphs. I know we've done this before. The black community is waves above everybody else in murder and manslaughter. Then we go to robbery. Black community, once again, greatly on top. Then we go to rape. Once again, the black community, highly elevated above everybody else. Then we go to aggravated assault. Once again, black community, elevated above everybody else. Then we go to motor vehicle theft, excuse me. Once again, black community, elevated above everybody else. We go to prostitution. Once again, the black community, elevated above everybody else. And then we go to weapons violations. And once again, the black community, way above everybody else. It isn't just because someone's skin color is one tone or another. There are demographics, my friends, that correlate to the end result or the end product. Abortions. 54% of the potentially born black children in this country were aborted last year. 54%. Depending who you read, between 86 and 88% of all black children that were born in this country were born to fatherless environments. Fatherless environment. So, there was 50 years ago today, there was a commission known as the Kerner Commission, named after a representative by the name of Otto Kerner. And what the guise was is that they were going to try to figure out why the decline in the black communities. And what they determined was that this is the official policy of the United States government, my friends, and it has been from 50 years ago today. Look it up. The Kerner Commission. I read all 410 pages. And in their synopsis, what is being pushed is white racism. You see, it's your fault that the black community is in such dire straits, Mr. and Mrs. White America. Never mind that you've paid trillions of dollars into all kind of gamut of social programs. Never mind that you are victims of black crime, completely more disproportionately than blacks are victims of white crime. But you see, folks, what they were after is to do away with the Judeo-Christian white culture in America, so they make us all racist. But you have to go a step further to what they were really after with all this. And that, my friends, is black victimhood, you see. Because if you're a victim, you're what? Number one, you're not on a level playing field, so you purport to think. And number two, you're a victim of everything in society, and nothing is then your fault, after all, because you're a victim. So, never mind that the black community on average has a 74% high school dropout rate in this country. It's not their fault, my friends, because they're victims of white racism, don't you see? What's the real reason? Never mind the political bulldog. What's the real reason for the decline in the black community? Why is it year after year after year the black community is number one in crime statistics, number one in abortion rolls? Why? Number one in high school dropouts, but yet number one in unemployment, but yet they have more opportunities because it's all identity politics. If you're black, you have a better chance of getting federal jobs than if you're white or Asian or Latino. Why? Because there's actually quotas put in place for black employment through the government. As a matter of fact, if you're an employer and you hire a black person, you actually get tax benefits for doing that. So then, what is the reason? All these benefits are laid particularly for the black community, yet the results are completely opposite. I've already said the reason, my friends. Fatherless families. Now, listen to these statistics in and outside of the government. 63% of youth suicides come from fatherless homes. That's 5 times above the normal average. 85% of violent or aggressive behavioral disorders, according to the CDC, come from fatherless homes, an increase of over 20 times the average. 80% of rapists come from fatherless homes, a 14 times increase from the average. And that was put out by the Justice and Behavior, volume 14. And if you wish to read that, my friends, it's page 403. Let us continue. 70% in state-operated institutions come from fatherless homes. 9 times the average. That comes from the United States Justice Department in September. 85% of youths that are in prison come from fatherless homes. That is over a 20 times average. and that was put out by the Georgia Department of Corrections. And that wasn't just in Georgia, my friends. That was a national database. And then you have a study done by the Journal of Abnormal Child Psychiatry in November of 1995. And a study of 1,197 fourth grade students that had great levels of aggression, all 88% came from fatherless homes. A 39 times increase. Are you starting to see what is really the cause of this? Now understand, my friends, this has happened by policies implemented by the government to destroy the family structure. And I'll give you the greatest example, because the black community makes up a very high disproportionate part of the welfare rolls. And here it is. If a black couple have a child, and or any couple has a child and they go on welfare, guess what the father, and I'm really doing air quotations on that one, guess what the father has to do? Leave. That's right. If the father is in the household, the welfare benefits will either be taken away completely or greatly reduced. Hence, the destruction of the family on anybody who is on the welfare rolls. And as I've said, the black community is on a great, highly disproportionate per capita welfare. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? The gun had nothing to do with these murderers. The psychotropic drugs do. The lack of morality. And just think about this, friends. Then they taught this immorality, and they took away our moral foundation of Christianity from the public school system and turned it into indoctrination systems of public fools. And then they disarmed gun-free zone schools. They're not gun-free. They're disarmament zones. They're protectionless zones. That's all they are. Folks, criminals are criminals because they don't obey laws. Like Nancy Pelosi, we said to you last week. You know, when the illegal immigrants do something illegal, then we'll, what? When the adjective you're using to describe these people is illegal. This is what the base of all these shootings are. The psychotropic drugs, and your children in these defenseless environments are victims of a system implemented by the force of law that we've been forced to pay for. At a very expensive rate, I will add. So my friends, I am running out of time. I am going to continue with just some quick quotes from our first president, George Washington. And I know we read these a couple of weeks ago, but I really want, folks, these words to hit home. A free people ought not only to be armed and disciplined, but they should have sufficient arms and ammunition to maintain a status of independence from any who might attempt to abuse them, which would include their own government. Let us continue. If freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to the slaughter. Well, your children are being led like sheep to the slaughter. Firearms are only second to the Constitution in importance. They are the people's liberty teeth. Now, real quick, we have children going around masquerading as adults who haven't obviously studied history, and now they're going to go on a national tour. Well, I did some research on who's behind this funding. Can you say George Soros? No surprise there. But you know the one that was really shocking? Well, not to me, but it may be to the average person because I understand they're guys. Planned Parenthood, the organization that's responsible for murdering 9,000 babies a day in this country, through your tax dollars, wants to take your tax dollars and take away your rights to defend yourself, because Planned Parenthood, my friends, is also funding these ignorant high school students. Completely ignorant. I'll ask them, students, I want you to name one people, one nation, one culture, one entity of any demographic that you wish to divide our people into that has benefited from being disarmed. I want you to name one. You can't name one, can you? You know why? It's never happened. Every person, every people, every culture, every race, every nation, every whatever you want to divide it by, who's ever been disarmed has been conquered violently. So, my friends, understand, it's not the gun, it's not the knife, it's not the car, it's not the match. We are seeing the results of the federal government taking away the ability for our preachers to preach and implementing a secular, non-moralistic education/indoctrination system. That is the results that we're seeing today. My friends, as always, we're very thankful you take the time in your busy day to watch our program. We always close in asking you to seek truth, obtain knowledge, and manifest kindness to your fellow man. And we always close in reminding you that your government is your responsibility. We thank you for watching.
Can't believe we are all so blind. I can't believe we are all so blind. Well, the truth is very simple, very hard to find.